Hello, this interview is one in a series of interviews that the Special Collections section of the State Archives of North Carolina is conducting with the American Indian Heritage Commission to record the lived experience of indigenous communities in North Carolina. These oral histories will be part of an archived series and will be made available to the public. Today is Friday, February 9th, 2024. It is, quarter to 11? I think. And this is an interview conducted with, if you can give us your full name, please.
Ada Elizabeth Jacobs Rogers.
And can you spell that for me?
ADA ELIZABETH ROGERS Rogers.
All right. Excellent.
Jacobs. I didn't.
You didn't include. Do you want to include something else?
Just my maiden name, Miss Jacobs.
Okay. Thank you. All right. These interviews are being conducted for the American Indian Heritage Commission Oral History Project. The interviewer is John Horan. I've got Curry Bird here.
Curry Bird, Director, North Carolina American Indian Heritage Commission, KERRYBIRD.
Who knows the drill. I appreciate that. Thank you. Actually, what's your name?
My name is Pamela Rogers Howell, and I am Ada's daughter.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So we're doing this interview. It's a video interview at your home here in Bolton, North Carolina. And the first question I have for you, easy question, where and when were you born?
I was born in Bladen County, right on this piece of land that we're on now, back in 1938, October 1938, October 31st.
And tell me about yourself.
Well, I was the baby of 10 children, and back then there wasn't too many doctors around. They had home remedies. I remember being doctored with collard leaves for fever. They'd put collard leaves on your feet to get the fever out. They would use pope leaves for put them on your body, to draw temperature out if you had a cold or something like that. And they would give you turpentine, so many drops of regular turpentine on the end of a spoon with sugar, a little sugar, and if you were 4 years old, they would give you 4 drops, depending on your age. And actually, it worked. It really did. If you had a real bad cold, the next day you were doing better. And I grew up on a farm, and we worked hard, but we were a close family. And we had the church, and then when I started to school, we had what you call the Red Hill School right down across from Red Hill Cemetery now. And I think it was called Wide Awake. And it was a little three room with dividers in it. And that's where I graduated from No, we didn't graduate from that school because I remember having to go to school in New Hope Baptist Church while they were building Wide Awake School. And we had teachers from Robeson County. They would drive back and forth. And we also had a health clinic eventually. They would come to my grandmother's house maybe once every quarter and give the ladies in the community that were pregnant, and they would give the children shots, and they would check the ladies, if they were pregnant or if they needed their blood checked and stuff like that, and that was the only doctors that we knew until Oh, I was in maybe the 7th grade. I had pneumonia, and we had traveling one doctor that was over at Lake Waccamaw, and he would drive to the patient's house. He had a chauffeur, and I had pneumonia, so he came out and gave me the first shot of penicillin that was given in Columbus County. I got it, and if I hadn't, I would have probably been dead, you know. And he came back a couple of days later and checked. He said, so he wrote a piece in the paper, and he said, this penicillin really works. It's a good drug, you know. So that was an advancement for us. And I remember you didn't go shopping every week. This neighbor would come by with this mule or horse, whatever, wagon. You'd give him your order and a little bit of money, whatever money you had. And he would go pick up everybody's grocery, you know, like if they needed, whatever they needed, sugar or whatever. And he would take the order and bring it back to him, you know. And that was a way of them, because everybody didn't. I can remember when there was one vehicle in the whole community, and it would, if need be, would take people, you know, out to the hospital or whatever. And then that gradually changed over the years when people got to, they were forced to get out and go like to Wilmington and find construction work, or to Jacksonville. They did a lot of work. I remember my uncles did a lot of work in Jacksonville when they were building the Army base down there, whatever. And it gave them a start, so they could buy vehicles and buy tractors and stuff like that to farm with, and also improve their living conditions. And there were we grew everything that we ate: tobacco, corn, cotton, sweet potatoes. We always had a large garden, and naturally they ate deer, some, and fish. My mother was a great fisher. She loved fish. And we grew tobacco and cotton, and that's the way we survived, you know. I remember the war too. We moved in this house. There was 10 of us, but 3 of the sons passed away when they were children, real young. They had dysentery and stuff. You know, a lot of children did. They didn't make it. But it was during the war we started this house back in 41, I imagine, like that. So they finished it up the year that I started school, that I started the first grade. They finished it enough that we could move in. And that was in 44, and my sister was sitting in the front bedroom fixing her hair, listening to the radio, and they hollered, "The war is over." Well, we had a first cousin that we were very close to, a double first cousin actually, and he was overseas in Germany, and we tried to keep up with what was going on. And when they said the war was over, everybody jumped up and started yelling, and they started shooting guns and just celebrating, you know, the war was over, he's coming home. And there were several of the men in the community that were soldiers, and we were anxious for them to get back. And but during that time, and this is a sad part of the situation, his mother passed away with breast cancer. But we didn't let him know this until after he came home because he was, away in Germany, and we didn't want him to be worried with that. So that was not it was a sad part for us and him too, but we got through it. And they knew nothing about cancer then like they do now. But anyway, he was always very close. And my grandmother was a widow. Her husband got killed. A tree fell on him over in the grain swamp. He was cutting timber, and a tree fell on him. So she raised 7, 8 boys and 2 girls, with the iron wrists, iron hands. She was very strict. And she would sit on the porch, and if it was corn planting time, you'd see her foot. She'd stomp her foot, and it was time to plant corn. So you had to get out and plant that corn in March. That was it. And she run the farm from the porch. She run the farm. And the boys would, the ones that were married, they would even come in and help, do the crops and stuff. And we grew tobacco and different crops like that, for a money crop. And it was a long journey as far as earning money. Money was, you didn't take as much money, but yet and still, you had to have a certain amount to survive. And we did a lot of canning, and we had an apple orchard, so we did our own fruit and canned a lot of food. And that's the way you got through the winter, with the collard greens and the turnip greens and canned food that you did in the summer. And now when we went to town, are you sure you want to hear this?
I want to hear all of this. I love it.
When we went to town, that was a different story because it was segregated. You couldn't just walk up to a hot dog or hamburger stand. Back then they had, they would have them and they didn't go in. You didn't go in and eat. They'd have like little stands or buildings, and you'd get your hot dog or whatever and go back to your vehicle or your whatever, walk down the street and eat your food. Well, it was segregated, whites, blacks, so there was no Indian sign there. So if you didn't want to go with the blacks, which we didn't, you had to fight your way through, to get a hot dog or hamburger, and they wouldn't serve you a lot of times. And so the people sometimes would pack their lunch. If they went to the tobacco market, they would pack a lunch and take it, and so they wouldn't have to buy from them. And then they realized that they were losing a lot of business. So they started coming through the community. And there was no paved roads. All of these were dirt roads, and some of them, through here especially, they would have big holes, and they didn't have road scrapers back then to scrape the roads. And but anyway, there was some furniture places over there, and we bought some furniture from them, and they let my dad have it on, fall terms. You get the furniture, you pay for it when you sold tobacco. And that was a lot of the way they did everything, like even some of their food, they would charge it until the fall of the year when they sold tobacco. and I'm sure they did it in other places too. But we left that era and went to where you could possibly walk in a restaurant, or something, and they would let you go to the back and sit or they would try to put you in the back like you were less than, But that started going away whenever the 60s and 70s came in. And when I graduated high school in 57, I left and went to Baltimore to work, or Towson, Maryland. And I worked there for 3 or 4 years. And that's where I met my husband, and we got married, and that was that, But it was still, the community was still segregated somewhat, but then we got to mixing with Robeson and with Sampson County, and with people started going out to Wilmington, and a few of them moved out of the area, and because of jobs, and moved out to Wilmington and Leland and like that, and other states. And some of the young men went to service. So it really made a big difference. And then a few of our young ladies went to Pembroke to college and became teachers, and we were grateful for that, and grateful for the ones that went out to the Army and the ones that got out and found better jobs and a better life. And it wasn't that the community was bad. We were very close-knit, very, very, most everybody's kin to each other. And you had to get out if you found a mate, unless you were marrying in a marriage. You had to get out to find someone to marry, if you were planning on getting married. And a lot of the people in here now that are married are related. Might not be close, but back, 2 or 3 generations, they're related. And that wasn't good for the offspring. So all of that went on, and they built churches, and at one time they were trying to get recognized as Indians, and this gentleman he said he was from California, but his wife, I think, Miss Priscilla could probably tell you more about this than I could. But anyway, he came and he said that he would try to get us recognition. Well, we didn't want, he talked something about a reservation, but we discussed that, or the adults did, I didn't, about the reservation, but they just wanted to be recognized as Indians, and where they came from, the area that they came from. And some said that we were offspring of the Cherokees. Others said that we were offspring of some tribe in South Carolina. I don't know. But anyway, we settled here in the swamp, and he worked real hard. He never would promise anything. He would say, "We will take a jump at it," but frankly, I might be getting in trouble saying this, but he drained this community of a lot of money because every family had to pay a little bit of money, and back then money was not all that easy to get. And they did go to Washington, but all they did was meet a senator and have their pictures made. I have a picture of them somewhere here with, you know. And he wrote a little pamphlet called The Falling Star. I don't know whether you have ever read one of those or not. Some of the people might have one. I don't think. Is there one? Might be one at the tribal ground, I don't know. But he was a very shrewd person. He would say, we'll take a jump at it. He never would promise that he would deliver anything. He would say, we'll take a jump at it. And my dad worked closely with him and probably spent a lot of money that he could have not, you know, and finally, when he did all of these things, he decided that that was all he could do. So he left, and he left the community a lot poorer than he found it. And some people had to struggle to get that money back, you know, and keep going, but they did. And that was the end of any recognition that Waccamaw Siouans had, you know, back then that I know of. And we had neighbors, and they traded with other races and got along, you know, well with. But other people didn't come in and socialize that much until later. They started. I don't guess they even knew anything about the Sampsonians until I remember the first trip I ever made to Sampson County, and several of my sisters married men from Sampson County. And from Robeson, you know, they got to mixing, and it was good for the community to mix with other people. And a few of the girls, I know a couple of my sisters went out of town and went to work, like down at Morehead City and like that. They would go down and stay for 2 or 3 months and sit with someone for money, you know, to earn money. And if it wasn't tobacco time, but if it was tobacco time, we had to work in tobacco. And it gave them a chance, you know, to earn some money and stuff. And after that, maybe that was before I had left for Baltimore. My sister went to Bavard, and she took up beautician work. So she came back, and she did beautician work for a while, and then there wasn't enough money in that for her around here, so she also left and went to Baltimore and worked there for a while. So, what else would you like to know?
Sure. Oh, I've got a few follow-up questions.
Okay.
Specifically about the recognition. When was that?
That was, let's see. You mean when Jim Alexander was here?
That when the story you told about the California guy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was probably back in the early 50s.
Okay.
And he stayed, well, Miss Priscilla can tell you all about it because he roamed and boarded with her parents, him and his wife. And I know he would come here a lot and talk to my dad. And my dad, I think, was the one that was supposed to be collecting the money for him to do this and to do that, that he was always taking a jump at. And I could never see really what he did that made that much difference. I don't know. I'm not saying that he wasn't a good person. I'm just saying, you know.
Why was your dad mixed in?
Why was he? Because somebody, I guess, had to lead the way. So I guess they thought that he was more capable of leading the way, and we I guess he would talk more than other people, you know, and he was really interested. He always wanted better for the community, and he was always trying to get better schools. He worked a lot with the schools, trying to get us high school and a better elementary school, and then they started doing drainage. They needed drainage in the community, so I'm not saying he did that, but my Uncle Roscoe, which was his brother, and a few more of the gentlemen around got the state to run canals through what they call rice field, so they could farm that land, because if it would rain, you couldn't get out of rice field hardly. You would be watered in, you know. The water was so bad and no place to go. I remember my mother going over to see a friend one evening, Sunday I guess it was. So we came out it came a rainstorm. So we had to come out on a mule and wagon, and the water was up to right under the wagon body. You know, I was small as a child, but I can remember that. And they brought us out to the main dirt road in that mule and wagon, and it was a prankster, you know, and it just filled up, and they were blocked in until the water left. So that's why they wanted the canals put in. So they finally got canals run through, and it made the farmland better, and or it drained it so they could farm. And they built a community over there. You know, a lot of the people just spread out and had homes over there. And it's still kind of wet when it rains down that way. And that's why they call that rice field, because they did grow rice in that area. The Indians and I don't know who else, but they grew rice over there in the wetlands.
Yeah, and so the grandmother you mentioned that was the farm director.
Right.
That's your dad's mom?
My dad's mom.
Okay, so she raised these kids alone, it sounds like, for a long time.
She did.
And taught them how to farm.
Absolutely. Some of them farmed. Well, they all farmed, really, but they also would learn that they could get out in the winter and do construction work, you know, like in Wilmington or Jacksonville or wherever they could find work. And some of them worked in the woods, whatever work they could find to earn money. Yeah, she raised her whole family by herself, actually. She was a good planner, but she was a very strict grandmother.
Well, that's my question. Was she the one who taught you how to farm?
Yes, I'm sure she did. She was certain things in the garden had to be planted a certain time, certain days, certain ways, and I remember right across the road there where that new brick house is sitting and where Sammy's house is sitting across the Old Lake Road there was her garden. And that was a holy grail. You know, it was, there was my Uncle Walter, which never got married. He stayed there with her, and two of my aunts lived there for most of their lives. And Roscoe was the baby boy, so he stayed close by. And all of my uncles and aunts were, pretty close around. And he would do the garden, and it had to be done a certain time and a certain way. I guess that was their, you pull beets at a certain time, and you cook the beets and canned them. And you set out potatoes at a certain time, and everything had to be done on a moon thing, whatever the moon said. And we still do a lot of that. I have a neighbor that lives across the way, and when I get ready to plant my garden, I call her and ask her what days are good garden days, and she'll tell me what's good for above ground crops and what's good for under the ground crops. And I can't, I think it does better. I'll put it that way. I think it does better when you follow those signs. And what days to set out trees and stuff like that. So we still kind of adhere to those things. And use what they call the almanac. And it works for us anyway. And when you should kill hogs and stuff like that, you just don't kill them when the weather's not right and the temperature and stuff. But now, since everything is modern and they have freezers and all of that, but back then it was different. So it made a big difference of what you did and when you did it.
Yeah, definitely more tied to the seasons and all of that.
You planted garden peas in January and potatoes and onions maybe in February, and then some people still do now. In March or February, they plant their turnip greens and stuff like that, But definitely the garden peas were in the 12 days of Christmas, the old 12 days of Christmas, you plant garden peas. And arch potatoes, you could plant them early. And onions and whatever, like that. That was and I think it works. Because, I've tried it, and it really works. And what else would you like?
Well, I think that's fascinating, and I'm also interested. Before we started, you mentioned your grandfather and a cemetery. Is this the same?
Oh, my father and a cemetery.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. This Red Hill Cemetery right down here. My father donated that piece of land in I think it was 33 or 34, because two of my older brothers died. Rufus, and actually I have three brothers that died early, young. Lattimore, which is buried down past the bridge going to Bolton, and Rufus and Sterling were the first two people that were buried out here, and they were babies or young children. They died at a young age. And then there was a Baldwin gentleman that was buried after them, and that was the first three people that were ever buried in that cemetery. And needless to say, they had no coffins back then. They built their own coffins. And I remember going with my mother to what you call wakes now, but they would be in the homes, and they would wash the bodies, and lay them on what they call a cooling board, which was just a board and or a couple of wide boards, and put a sheet over them, and the people would set up all night. And there was a Mr. Stuart Patrick, which was our neighbor. He built coffins, and he built coffins for children and adults. And my cousin that lived across the way, she used to line them, take sheets and line them and tack them in the coffins, to make it look more. And they would put the body in there and tack it down with nails, the top, and bury it. They didn't have all this installation and all this fine stuff. That was the way they buried people. And they didn't hold them up for, second day, third day, they were buried, because there were no embalming and stuff like that. And
what's the name of the cemetery?
Red Hill. So since then there's quite a few people been put there. But Louis Jacobs was the first one that donated the acre of land for that cemetery, and then I think Mr. Manlin sold them an acre to enlarge the cemetery. And then his daughter sold them a driveway to make it a little bit larger where they could drive around.
And Louis, is that your father?
That was my father.
Okay, so what are your parents' names, just for the record?
Louis and Rhoda.
Rhoda, okay.
Jacobs.
And what was your grandmother's name?
Lucinda.
Lucinda. Lovely.
Lucinda Jacobs.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather was named Jerry Jacobs. And he was the one that got killed. A tree fell on him over in the green swamp. They were working, cutting trees for a living, and a tree fell on him. And I think my Uncle Roscoe was real small then, and he got killed. So she had the responsibility of bringing the boys up by herself. Well,
And your mom's parents, what were their names?
Liza and Reddix Jacobs. And they were from, met my grandfather. He was floating logs from Pembroke, or not Pembroke, but Robeson County, down the Cape Fear to Wilmington, and she met him over on the river. And they got married. Yeah. So actually, my grandfather is from Robeson, and his name was Reddick Jacobs.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, that's great. So, and when you said you went into town as a kid to go get, the hot dog stand, a hamburger stand, what town was it?
Whiteville.
Whiteville. And
Whiteville, Bolton, either place. Now, you could have gotten away with it in Wilmington, because my skin's a little lighter than, but you might have gotten away with it in Wilmington, but you wouldn't in Whiteville, because they would, and it was bad. It really was. They were very prejudiced. And it's still, all of it hasn't gone away yet. It's still some there. But it's a lot better than it was, since they found out that, money is the main thing. And we got out and could, get away and meet other people. And
yeah, and just before, well, actually, let's move to school for you. Let's talk about schools for you. You mentioned Wide Awake.
Right. I went to, now, before the year that we were graduating from the 8th grade, if we had not moved into Wide Awake, we would have had to have gone to Sampson County to go to school, because we couldn't go to a white school. we had to go to an Indian school. So the closest high school for us would have been Sampson County. And a lot of my sisters did board. They went to Sampson County and boarded and went to high school. And that's where we met. They met a lot of their friends, you know. And it kind of broadened the community, you know, that. And then after that, Pembroke, when the college opened, that was an outlet for us, you know, and a lot of, well, some went to college there. And it was a great privilege to be able to get out and go. I went to Wide Awake and graduated, went and worked, and then I got married, came back home, and with how many children? 3, 4. No, I had 5. I went to Cape Fear Tech and took mechanical drafting, graduated from that. And the year that I graduated from mechanical drafting, they took all the mechanical drafting and moved it out Midwest from Wilmington. So that was a no-no. So the next best thing was a factory job, you know, sewing, whatever. So I worked in sewing plants for a while. And then I decided to go to home health. So I went and took a course in home health and worked there for 22 years, I think it was. And then I decided just to retire and not do heck, just garden.
Well, that's terrific. Yeah, I want to just kind of go into each one of these pieces because it's fascinating to me. You were the first then to go to high school here of your siblings. Is that true? Is that what I understood?
To go in, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because you said your sisters.
Yeah, all the rest
Sampson.
of them went to Sampson.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you think about that? Being able to stay.
Oh, it was nice being able to stay home. Yeah, I mean, you know, at that age, that was a lot for them to, because they boarded with other people, you know, and I'm sure it wasn't all that comfortable being away from home, being away from your parents, but they did, and they would come home, you know, occasionally, and go back to school, and some of them, but then on the other hand, they would have never met some of the men that they come in contact with. You know, it was a good outlet for them. And the people were nice to them. They became families, you know. And we are friends and will always be friends with the people that we met there. And matter of fact, there was a lot of marriage going on between the two communities. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see. Agnes, Alma, Bernie, and Leon, my oldest brother, the only brother I had. All of them married people from Sampson County. So it was really an outlet for them, you know. And because there was nobody here to marry. If you did, you would marry some of your kin people, and that was not a good thing. Mm-hmm. So
the school you went to, do you remember your teachers?
You mean the high school? Mm-hmm. Sure. Let's see. It was Mr. Willard Locklear was the principal. Mr. Clyde Locklear taught school there. Miss Anna Lois Oxendine. Who was some more of them? Mr. Peter Dial taught school there. Miss Polly Patrick taught elementary school, and her sister Kelly May. They were both Jacobses, but they were from Robinson. And they were sweet women. And who else was it? I can't think of his name right now. He boarded with, they would come and board. They would, um, they would come and stay with us. Like, come on Monday morning, they'd come and go to school. Then on Tuesday night, they would stay with us. And maybe Wednesday evening, they might run back home to their family, come back, and they would stay Thursday night and get back on Friday. And they did that for years. And a lot of them boarded right here with us. And then there was a gentleman that boarded out there with Uncle Roscoe. And who was the other ones that boarded? I can't remember anybody boarding anyplace else, but I grew up with teachers in the house all the time.
What was that like?
It was not bad. The worst teacher I had was my sister Agnes. She was a wartime teacher. She went for so many months, and up at Beaufort or somewhere, and took enough to teach elementary students when the war was going on. And I was in her class. And I hate to say it, but I did not. She was hard. I did not like her. She was the worst teacher I ever had. But the other ones were nice. Miss Calumet and Miss Paris and Miss Anna Lois Oxendine and Miss what was her name? Benny, and I'm trying to think of her name. She was a real small lady, but her and my sister were always, they had a lot of fun together because Doris would pick at her, and Miss Flora Oxendine, her husband was named Edward. They were great. They were just simply great people. And she stayed with us. She boarded with us also. And he would come and bring her on Sunday afternoon. And my dad just loved him because they had something in common. They farmed. And I guess he would take care of the children while she was teaching, and when she went home on Wednesday or Friday, she'd take over, and that was the way they did. There was something else. Oh, Mr. Charlie Brewerton. Now, he was from, I think he got his education in Pembroke, but he had gone to Washington and lived there with his daughter and her husband, I think, for a while. But he was a very educated man. And he worked hard to get the wide awake school going. But he taught whenever they were teaching school in the church and wherever, they could find a place to teach school. And he had this little black car. And he was quite a character. He didn't know too much how to drive, but he learned how to drive because he knew he had to get from Robinson down here. And so he purchased this little car, and he would leave the lights on or something, and my cousin would have to come out, and get his car going to get him to go to the school to teach, and he was a very devoted man, though. He did a lot for this community. And he would go home on the weekends up to Robinson, and come back on Sunday evening. But everybody loved Uncle. They called him Uncle Charlie. And he got the high school going, though, for here. When he had lived in Washington, and he was well educated. And I think he finally wound up marrying a lady by the name of Ida Blue from Pembroke. I know he dated, they were dating. And I think they finally got married. And he was kind of elderly, though, when he left here, when he quit teaching here. But he would fight. We'd go over to the school board, and really work with the board members here that were on the school board and also with the county to get the school going. So he did. And that was it. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think living with your teachers, school never ends then, probably, right?
Probably not, because some of them didn't teach my grade, the grade that I was in, but they still boarded here. But yeah, you had to be kind of nice. But they were a lot of fun. They were not. The worst one I had was my sister. Now, she would get all over me about, getting my homework up. And she did not cut me any slack. And I didn't think that was fair at all. But that was life, And I was a sickly child, too. I had pneumonia 2 or 3 times. And, and you had to get out and walk to school. I would meet my friend, which lived right over here. She would walk out and we'd join each other. And the only way you could ride the bus is if it would be raining, they would pick us up out at my grandmother's and let us ride on to the schoolhouse. But if it wasn't raining, we had to walk because they only had one bus. And it took the children further down the road than we lived. So if we... this building over here that you see that's the plastic plant, that was the school building. And we lived close enough by that we could walk, which was what, quarter mile, half a mile. So we had to walk unless it was raining. And the one bus that they used, they took the children down on what we call Ricefield, but actually it's down the road, down on past New Hope Church and like that. But before they got the buses, they walked from down there. And that was about 2 or 3 miles to school.
Did you say the school now it's not the school anymore?
It's not the school anymore. When they joined. Columbus County joined their schools, so that made them close this one down, and they went over to Hallsboro Elementary and Hallsboro High. But this plant that's over here now was the Waterway School.
When did they change?
57. I graduated in 57.
Okay.
When?
Yeah.
Right.
She's talking about integration.
Yeah, when they had to integrate. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was maybe like in the 60s.
Yeah.
I'm not sure because I graduated in 57 and it was still going.
There you go. So we've talked about school. We've talked about a little bit about work, farming, as you're growing up. What did you do for fun?
Oh, for fun. Well, we had 2 little stores, and we would, on Sunday, we would walk to the store, and if we were lucky, we'd have 5 cents to buy us a soda pop. And after church, we would come home and eat. Then we would walk to the store, which was back down past New Hope Church, and buy us a soda pop and see if we could find any friends around and flirt with the boys. And we'd go to BTU. And, that was it. There was no, what else did we do? Oh, I had a cousin that was older, and he would get his dad's truck and ride. That was after we got in high school. He would ride us around like to the lake, and like that. 2 or 3 of us girls, and I remember dating maybe one or two of the boys around here, and a time or two, but not that much. And
Did you ever go to like a movie theater or anything like that?
I did. I did. We went to a drive-in over at Whiteville. Once I went with this guy that I really liked. Wish I could have gone back more. And then I would go with my older sisters and their boyfriends because they'd come from Glennon and they'd sit around, and me and my first cousin, which she lived in Baltimore and she died there, Jessie, she would spend the weekend with me, and we would get in this next room and put our ears to the fireplace, and find out when he was going to ask them to go out. Don't you want to go out and get a soda or go out to the movies? So they would discuss the movies, and after a while they'd say, well, you reckon those girls want to go? And we would be just, sitting there waiting. Are they going to ask us to go? Are they going to ask us to go? So we'd go out with them. I mean, we'd go on a date with them, with my older sisters and their boyfriends. And that worked. I mean, we stayed out of trouble, and watched the movie, and it was fun. It was.
Now, in the movie theater, because it's drive-in.
Right, drive-in.
So I'm interested. Were there any rules about, like, as you talked about the segregation in the restaurants?
Right.
Was there any segregation for the drive-in?
No, I not that I remember. But then on the other hand, there might have been, but I know we always went to the better side, because these guys were light-skinned. They were, and then the war too made a difference. When the soldiers came back, I know. My brother-in-law, one of them, were very dark complected, olive complected, and he had a few run-ins with people, wanting to try to make him sit in places, and he said, no, I fought for this, and you're not going to do this to me. And he was very nice, about it, but he just wouldn't let them treat him that way. And they'd back down most of the time, or he would leave, or whatever. But it was not an easy life, because if it was money and business, that was different. They were different, but if it was socializing, they didn't want us to socialize with. Thought that they were better, I guess, or something, or different, or we were different. I don't. It's just quite different.
Yeah, and you went to Baltimore after you graduated high school.
Yes.
What took you to Baltimore?
A job. I wanted to get away and get a job, so I did. I worked in a hospital there, which quite a few of the girls from here did. Maybe 15 or 20 went to Baltimore and worked.
What's the connection to Baltimore?
Well, it wasn't Baltimore, it was Towson, and it was a private hospital, and they were hiring, and you had your room and board. And you made, a decent, back then it was decent money. And it was just a chance to have a better life. And, I guess there were 20 or 30 of the girls from the community went and worked there. And some of them married there, some of them found better jobs. Some of them lived there. Like I said, my cousin, she married a guy from in not Baltimore. He was from on up, Maryland on up, and that's where they lived until she died. It's in the Baltimore area.
Do you remember how you specifically heard about this opportunity?
My sister found it in the newspaper. They were asking for people to work, so she applied. My oldest sister, she applied. She went. Then not the next oldest, but the next one, she applied, and they were just hiring. So then it kind of spread, and they kept calling. And I guess there were 30 or 40 of the young women from here left and went to Baltimore and worked.
And you met your husband there?
Yes.
What was his name?
Lamar.
And how did you meet him?
This friend of mine asked me if I would like to go on a picnic on a weenie roast, and we were all working at the hospital. So I told her I'd go. I said, yeah, sure. So I went, and he happened to be the other person that she was finding, somebody to go out with, and that was it. He was from. Well, really, he was raised in Atlanta, Georgia, but he was from Covington, Georgia. And we made about 55 to 60 years of that kind of life.
and you were married there?
Yes.
And how long did you stay there after you were married?
Maybe a couple of years we stayed there.
What did you do it?
My oldest child was born in Baltimore. Okay. And then I came back home.
So you came here, which is your home, but it's not his home.
No, it's not his home.
But he was okay with coming back?
Oh, he followed me everywhere I went.
So why'd you come back?
I guess I was the baby, and I was spoiled, and I just wanted to come home. So I came home, and he came home with me, or shortly after. And that was when my oldest daughter was born. She was born in Baltimore, and then I moved here. And the others were born. She was born in Fayetteville, Highsmiths, and the others were born in Columbus. So we booted around for about 55, 60 years together.
How many kids did you say you had altogether?
5.
Nice, yeah. Mm-hmm. And
3 boys, 2 girls and 3 boys.
Okay, very good. And what did he do for work while you were here?
He was a construction superintendent.
Okay.
When he got, that's what he did here.
And what did you do here?
While I was here?
Yeah, while you were here, what did you do for work?
Oh, like I said, I went to Cape Fear Tech. I worked in a sewing plant for years. Then when they closed the sewing plant, I took up home help, and I worked with home health for 22, 23 years. Then I retired. Oh, before that, when I first went to Baltimore, I worked for Hofberger's Oil Company as I guess you'd call it, in the office. And then I went to Shepherd Pratt. And then some of the other girls worked in stores. All of them didn't work at the hospital, but most of them did. It was a beautiful place. It was simply beautiful. Very, very exclusive. Private. It was a private hospital where they kept the no, it was, it was very nice. And you had your own, you didn't have to leave the facilities if you didn't want to.
And when you came back here, what year was that?
63. Was it 63? I think it was, yeah.
And so 63, it's 2024 now. That's a long time. There's a lot of changes in this community, in this area.
There is.
Tell me about some of those changes.
Well, there's been a lot of new, nicer homes built. The roads have been paved. We have at least a couple of 3 businesses in the community, which is great. We've had drainage, canals run, which they need to redo them, but that's neither here nor there. And a lot of people have built nicer homes, much nicer homes, and they have gone out of the community, not so much to live, but out to work, and that's made a big difference of them having to get out and mix with other people and work, and yet they come back to this their own community, and I think it made a big difference. I know my uncles, they helped build Jacksonville, and are the base, the Army base down there. And when he first started, he had to borrow his neighbor's station wagon to haul the people to work, and he would rent his station wagon during the week until he could get bought a vehicle of his own to drive. And that's the way they got started. They would venture out like that, and a lot of them became foremans, and they were hard workers and very, very good workers, and they did well.
So the focus, of course, of this interview is to talk about, the community, the American Indian community, the Waccamaw Siouan, and we're talking about, you mentioned early on how your dad was involved in some federal recognition work,
Right.
and that's to one side. But since then, since you've been back, since '63, how have you gotten involved in American Indian advocacy?
An American Indian advocacy. Now break that down for me a little bit.
So you're talking about, I'm thinking about the community here and how you work to help promote
Different.
aspects of the community.
Well, when I'm working, I usually work with the Indian people as clients, home health as clients. And sometimes I would have to go out of the community if there were, no, but most of the time we have seniors and like that need in-home help. And we have a ladies' auxiliary that we check on each other if they're sick. I know I have some now that need, they need someone drop in and visit and do whatever. And I do that. And if they need a pot of collards, I fix them a pot of collards. And you would be surprised how much that, and or fix them a meal if they needed it. And I don't visit as much as I would like to, but because my health is not what it used to be. But I do try to get around and see them. And I participate in church activities some, and tribal activities when that's going on. I try to help out with them, or at least support them. I go, and they did have quilting and stuff like that going on. The Indian ladies, and we do that some.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that, but before I'd like to talk about the culture of the tribe, and quilting is included, of course. I'd like to talk about that in a second. I want to know, first of all, before that, could you name some of your mentors over the years?
Some of my mentors, Miss Lee, we called her Lee John, but her name is Lee Jacobs. She was a mentor. Miss Murray Freeman, she was a mentor. And Miss Polly Patrick. Naturally, my grandmother, Lucinda, and Miss Nettie Patrick, she was a mentor. Those are older people. And if you were growing up then, you were safe, at any of these people's homes. They would watch out for you, And we were just, you may as well say, one big family that looked out for each other. And that's the way we survived. If I went to down the road to my neighbor's house, I was under her rule, whatever she would tell me I had to do, or she'd send me home, or even, threaten to spank me. You just was that way. If you were there, you were under their care, and nobody said anything. If you got a spanking, you just got a spanking. And I never got one, but, it could have happened. And who else?
What about when you're older? When you're back, you have your kids, and now you're working in this community.
I didn't exactly stay in this community when my kids were young. Now, this community extends across 211, we lived up in Council, what's it called? Saspan. We call it Saspan. But now those were wonderful people. And they're part of the community. They're Indians. And we have a piece of land there, so we lived there for a while. And then my father lived here, and he lived alone. So when he got older, rather than put him in a facility, I moved my family here to look after him, So that's why we're here. So when he passed away, they said, well, you're there, stay there. So I stayed here and kind of redid things a little, and this house was built in 43, 44. And we've been knocking around here ever since.
Great. And, let's get into the discussion about the tribal culture. You're talking about quilting. This isn't the first time we've spoken with somebody from the Waccamaw community, and quilting has come up then. Why do you think quilting is so important to the community?
Well, because they do a lot of quilts that have Indian designs, and that helps, And two, we have some very good quilters. And it's something that used to, now it's not as relevant as it was back then, but if you didn't have quilts when I was coming up, you froze, because the houses were not heated, there was no central heat. You had a wood stove in one room, or someplace or a far place, and it was cold, so you needed quilts, and that's why I remember my mother. I mean, she quilted like crazy because there was a bunch of children and they all needed quilts, and when they got married, she'd probably quilt, and that was her Christmas gift, a quilt. And other people did the same thing. I know my cousin's wife, she was a vivid quilter, Miss Juanita, and Miss my other cousin that she still quilts, Linda Fay. She does a lot of quilting, and Miss Shirley did a lot of quilting, and just quite a few people. Miss Lee, I think my cousin Lee has one up in the archives up in Raleigh that she did, and her pictures with it. So you might want to look sometimes and see that.
Yeah, I definitely will. Definitely. How about the name? Do you know where the origin of the name Waccamaw Siouan?
If I'm afraid to say, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe it became they took that name when Mr. Jim Alexander was trying to establish recognition here. And we claimed Lake Waccamaw was where, and they had, since they found all the canoes and all of that. So I think that's where they got that name from, the Lake Waccamaw.
Mm-hmm. And the other name, you mentioned it early, was
Siouan.
the Falling Star.
Oh, yes. That they say that a meteorite fell, and that's what caused this lake, which is Lake Waccamaw. And that's where that fallen star came from. They said that was a meteorite that fell and opened up this huge place, and it filled with water. But now, I don't know that, but that's what I was told.
And then you were about to say something about the Siouan part of the name. Do you know anything about that addition?
The Siouan, no, I'm afraid not. I wouldn't. I don't know that much about the Siouan part. Other than if it came from if we were connected to a tribe in South Carolina and we were pushed back, I don't know that. So I would be afraid to comment on it.
All right. And how about powwows? How have they changed over the years?
Oh, well, now we've always gotten together and had, before powwows, it was like, well, we would have homecomings and get together, but that wasn't like a powwow. But when they established the Waccamaw Siouan tribe and they got it going, then they started with meeting once a year, for a powwow. So that's where that came from. But before that, we always had large homecomings, and you know how the churches have homecomings, and then some of the families still, I know my uncle and aunt, they had quite a few children, and they still have what they call a family get-together, and everybody that's related, and that would be the whole community, would go and they take pictures and get together, have a nice day of fellowship and see people that they haven't seen for years and like that. And that all, I guess, came from them. The powwow, started out kind of in the same manner, I guess. I don't know how many years it's been going on, but it's been quite a few. 51.
Nice, 1971, 51. And so all of this, the quilting, even the gardening, the powwows, the name, all of the culture, that comes through you and your family. Your husband's not he wasn't part of this community. Was he American Indian?
No, he was a Georgia white man.
He was a Georgia white man.
Yeah.
And so your kids have Georgia white man, and they also have Waccamaw Siouan.
Right.
How did you teach them where they came from?
Well, it wasn't very hard because they've always been here. They grew up here, and they associated. I remember once, one of them said to me, Mom, it's so hard. Said, I don't know. Neither side wants to accept me, I said, be whoever be what you are. I said, if you want to be white, be white. I said, if you want to be Indian, be Indian. I said, be whatever suits you. And after he got older, he's just comfortable, with he doesn't live in the community, but he's comfortable he has friends, and I think they'd do anything for him that they could. And he feels comfortable with either side. And my oldest daughter, she lives in Leland, and she used to work at the tribal ground for a little bit until she went and moved to Tennessee, and she worked with the Knoxville, what was the name of that? Knoxville. She still gets mail from them, but anyway, she's made a career out of housing, helping people, in housing and stuff. And it doesn't bother her as far as, she could be either one, either place. She fits well either place, and they all do. And I don't think they've had a lot of trouble with, because there's so many that are intermarried, but there's very few that are truly, total Indian. There's mixed. But then they go for Indian, and so that's, or whatever.
Yeah. So, generally speaking now, talking about, the American Indian perspective and community in general, what do you think is the biggest need?
I think education. It's a very, we need more education, and more. Well, the job opportunities are there if the children can get the education to fill those jobs. I don't think there's, like there used to be a drawback with race and all of that. That's a thing of the past. And it's what you know anymore, and, how well you mix with people and get along with other people. And I don't think that's a problem since they've integrated the schools and all. They do well, And I think our people have come a long ways. They did well.
And that's the kind of the next question is about specifically the Waccamaw Siouan community. What's the biggest need for this community?
For this community, I think we need drug programs, to keep the kids away from drugs, counseling. We have some, and which is good if they would use it, but you take a little, it needs to be more than just, sometimes you have to encourage people, and we could use some more industry, better education. Of course, I think that they're doing a lot better than what we had a chance for. They have a better chance, and there's a lot of them that are out going to college and going to school, and getting good jobs and giving back to the community, and some of them are coming back to the community and living, because they find out that it's not all that grand out there when you're all crowded up. But it's I'm proud of the accomplishments that they've made, but we can still do a lot better.
That's terrific. So I only have a few more questions. So
Okay.
at this point, I'll see if Curry, do you have any questions you'd like to ask? Sure. All right. 1 second.
So you mentioned you had moved to Baltimore for a job.
Yes.
How did you get there?
I worked in tobacco and saved my money that summer, and I bought a train ticket in Fayetteville. I had a sister that was married and living in Fayetteville, so I went to Fayetteville and spent the night with her, and they took me to the train station. Got on the train, dumb as daylight, and went to Baltimore, and this young service person happened to be on the train, the soldier, and he sat with me, and we got off in Washington, and he showed me around, and said, there's the White House, which was, I'd never been that far out of anywhere before. And he rode on to Baltimore with me, and he said, well, I'm sorry, but you get off here and I have to go on. So he said, it was nice meeting you. And I said, it's nice meeting you. And I caught a cab and had just enough money to get from the train station to the hospital to work, where I was going to work. So I told him where I wanted to go, and he took me to the hospital. And my sister was there then working, so she knew I was coming. So when I got to the front office, they called her, and she came and got me, and I went in and filled out my papers, and I kind of cheated because I wasn't but 15. I lied that year to get a job because I wasn't going to work in tobacco another year. So I worked that summer, which I was in the 11th grade. I worked that summer until time to come back to school, and I saved my money and came back, graduated from high school, and then went back and worked there for 2 or 3 years, and I got married there.
How old were you when you got married?
21. Oh. And Susan was born, about 11, 12 months after. Yeah, my first child was. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that some folks from here married folks from Sampson County.
Yes, they did.
And you married a non-Indian.
Right.
How was it frowned upon for Indians to marry non-Indians?
Not really. Usually, but they would always tell us, you need to get out because you'll be intermarrying. We'll call, what is it called? Incest, intermarrying too much.
Right.
Because if you married anybody here, you'd be marrying your cousin. And that was not a good thing. So a lot of people married Robeson County and also Sampson County. And I remember my sister dating some guy from down around the Charlotte area, something. But he was a white guy, and that wasn't exactly what they just didn't want whites or blacks in the community then, and that's what they said. But anyway, when we met the people in Sampson County, then a lot of people, they just got to mixing and intermarrying, and also from Robeson County, and then it spread out to different places, and like this one lady said that came through. I think she was selling something. She said, "That's not an Indian community." I opened the door, and a white woman was standing there. She said, I went on to the next door, and there was an Indian woman standing there. So a lot of white women have came here to live, married Indian men. So it's kind of a mixture, but we still are more dominantly Indian than anything else.
So you also mentioned that you had a rice field place,
yes,
and where you grew rice.
Yes, they grew rice down here past New Hope Church. Back in, if you like you're going to Bolden, it would be on the left. Back in there, it was called Ricefield, and they did grow rice. My mother said they grew rice back there.
That's not a traditional food for here, is it?
Not really. I don't know how they grew it. Now, she knew all about that because she lived in this area, all her life. I only knew it by the name of, they just always called it Ricefield because they grew rice back there. And they grew rice back there because it was a water sop, And I don't know whether it was the Indians that grew it there or someone else. But people also lived back there. And it's just always been known to me when you get off of that road going from the church to Bolton, there's a road to the left when you go around that curve, and it's called Ricefield Road, and that's and quite a few people live back there.
So, since this is your family home, do you have particular memories of when you were growing up?
Oh,
now that you're in your home? Oh,
definitely. We always had teachers in the house. There was a big family. Well, it's a lot of cooking going on, a lot of outside work going on. And, I came up, pretty much as a spoiled child. It was fun. I mean, it was free, and you didn't think any, you knew where to go, and I had aunts and uncles that lived on, in the community down the road and over across this way, and everybody looked out for everybody. And as a child, they would kind of look out for each other's children, and I was kind of spoiled. I would go from one house to the other if I wanted to, until I got large enough to work in tobacco, and then I had to work. But I used to go stay with my aunt and uncle, Osie and Lucy, and my Aunt Red, which lived right down there, and they all lived, and almost within holler distance of each other. And then we had the neighbors across the road, which was my grandmother's brother, lived over there. And there was a gentleman that lived out this way, and he kept house, Mr. Howard Graham, I believe he was, Graham. And He was a good neighbor. And everybody was your neighbors. And they looked out for you.
So I know you mentioned hog killing,
Oh, yeah.
quilting, fishing,
Yeah.
and cropping tobacco.
Yes, cropping tobacco, topping and sucking tobacco, picking cotton. Oh, I hated picking cotton because when you reached to pick it, those stickers would stick you, and you didn't have a machine. You had a burlap bag on your shoulder, and you, of course, now the Robinson County people know about this, and you pick cotton, and it was a money crop, and so was the tobacco and the cotton, and I guess some corn were money crops, and I don't remember them planting as many what do you call them, soybeans as they do now, but for a money crop. But they definitely planted the corn, tobacco, and cotton was what they used as money crops.
And I know you mentioned also you had church homecomings before powwows. Are there any other activities that you would identify as traditional Indian activities? Games or
Yeah,
crafts or anything else that you would classify as a traditional Indian practice?
I don't know whether ball, but at one time they were playing ball like crazy, and before that, each year they would have go to the river and have fish fries, on the river, and that was fun when the shad season came in, and they would dry fish and hang them, like they did their pork meat and stuff like that. And my mother said that, her father died young, after, and my grandmother Liza, had to really be the man and the woman of the house. And she said that she would dry meat, deer meat, rabbit, whatever. They would salt it down, and she said they always had plenty of food, but it was, they didn't have freezers or anything back then, so they would salt their meat and keep it. And she said they always had something to eat, and during the wartime though there was such a ration on stuff. You had, and I have some stamps that I got saved from the war, where you could only get so much sugar. You had to have stamps, or so much lard. Lard was a thing because it was going overseas. You couldn't buy tires. They would have to patch their tire if it went flat. The people that had vehicles, and it wasn't easy. But they were sending the food that we were producing here over to the soldiers, and we were doing the best we could. And if you got lard, sometimes it would be what you call rancid or whatever. They couldn't use it, and people would have to raise their own food and their own hogs and milk cow and stuff like that. We always kept a cow, and so we could have milk and butter. And we'd kill a pig and have, that. But it was hard during the war, and that was actually, the war came up right after the Depression. So they were not out of the Depression when they went into World War II. So that made it really hard. If you didn't grow what you ate and grow your animals and things to eat and hunt. I imagine it wasn't an easy. It wasn't easy for a lot of people. I know the people through here as a child. I can remember my dad would plant an extra row of greens, and mom would can extra, even though she had a large family. She would always can more than what we needed because of the neighbors. You know, if a neighbor needed some, and that's the way they lived. They shared. And I remember borrowing. They would borrow from each other, and just whatever they had, they would share it.
Do you remember music in the community?
Yes. We had, my grandmother had one of those huge record, what did they call those things? Victrolas or something like that. It was real tall, a real piece of furniture, really. And I don't know whether Sammy has it or not, but anyway, that was about the only music that I ever knew until my dad got a radio. And she had some records, and they put the record in there, and it was real tall. And you had to turn the side thing to make it play. And that was just, and there was a few people that had banjos and guitars. And I don't know how well they could play them, but they could make a noise anyway. And the first time I really ever heard anybody playing a piano, I don't think it was here. I think it was maybe in Sampson County, and I thought it was so pretty, the music. And then my dad bought a radio, and that was really something. A radio was really fabulous. And at church they would have they would just sing, without music, and then a few people learned how to got guitars and learned how to play guitars and drums and different things. And I remember deer hides. Everywhere you looked on the tobacco barns, there would be deer hides hanging up drying. And that was just a part of life, just...
So how would you describe your roles between you and your husband? Equal? Were you more in control? Was your husband more in control?
Well, in control of what? You mean the household or the money or the what?
Parenting. Money.
Oh,
work.
I love to control the money. If I couldn't control the money, there was no going. Because he was a very free-hearted person in the past. I knew what it meant to not have, and he didn't. Well, he always had more than I did. He was a very giving person, and he was very well, I think he was very well educated. And he read a lot. He loved to read, and he would read and he would study, and he was a very good carpenter. He built this, he built that, he built quite a few things in the house. And that was after he had some trouble with his heart, and he had to quit work, so he did his shop and built stuff, but for a while. And he loved to garden, and he was a very easygoing to get along with, and he was well liked in the community. He was friends with everybody. they would come and get him to do things for him, build stuff. And he liked to garden. He liked to set out trees and stuff like that. And he wasn't too much on discipline. He'd leave that for me to do. And, that was about.
So how do you keep the Indian identity going with your grandchildren and your future great grandchildren and your?
Well, I have one that is 4 years old, and he says he is Waccamaw, Siouan, and Caucasian. So that's about it. And the others are. I think they know, by looking at their parents that they're, of course, now they don't even notice they're like that, but they tell them that they're Indian, and most of them are mixed Indian and white, and they look at their grandmother, and she's very much Indian, and they don't notice it. I mean, they act like, well, your grandma, that's it. And I don't know that they even realize what race is anymore, which is, but they do come to the powwows, and they fix them, their, little outfits and all of that, and they know that they're Indian. So, most of them, anyway, they know that. So, it makes a difference.
Excellent. Thank you, Curry. So I just a few more questions, and that is to ask you what you're most proud of.
What am I most proud of? Well, I'm most proud of having a long life and my children, and I'm proud that I live in an Indian community. I really am, because we all get along, and there's some wonderful people in this community, just wonderful, and we look out for each other, and we all have our little quips and quirks, but we get along, and we do well, I think. We've come a long ways from when I was 14, 15, on through the years. And there's been a lot of growth in some areas as far as education, and not as much as we'd like, but it's a lot better than what it was. And they have ventured out and gotten jobs and met people in the outside world, and they get along, but yet when they come back home, they're in an Indian community, and it's Buckhead and Ricefield, they call it, or Waccamaw, Siouan. So they, even though they go out and, mix in the world with other people, they're still come back home, it's home. Mm-hmm. So it's great to have that.
And what would you say your biggest achievement has been?
Oh, getting my children grown. My biggest achievement? Well, finishing school and having a job and raising a family, and what little I've helped out in the community, I'm proud of that, which is not very much, but it's better than none at all. And I really am very proud of my children. They've all did well.
Well, that's excellent. I'm at the end of the questions, the formal questions. I will leave this space for you if you have anything you'd like to add to this record while it's open about your life, about the community here. Anything you want to add here?
Well, yes, we need some activities for the younger generation. We really need something that they could do, to entertain them. We don't have enough social entertainment for them. And we need to get them involved in things that would be constructive for them. And we have the places and the people, we just don't have it done yet, but hopefully we will get that done and get the children, with a better understanding of their culture and a better education, and get them out in, so when they do go out, and they'll, have pride in their community and their culture. And that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Well, thank you for coming and having me.
Yeah, for sure.